Hello and welcome to our C4F1 look ahead to the Belgian Grand Prix in the second half of the Formula One season. I am not looking ahead alone. I am joined by David Coulthard. And first of all, Mark Webber, you appear to be in a very glamorous location.
I'm beside a French motorway, mate. I just left Le Mans about an hour ago. So I'm on my way south to find a bit more sun. I crossed the Eurostar tunnel a few days ago and I was getting, it was very wet, to say the least, in the UK. So I'm going to find a bit of sun. But who knows? Back towards Spa on the weekend, and we know what that place is like. So we might have some more rain there.
We do indeed. David, you're not by the side of a French motorway. Controversial choice for this. How are you? How's your summer been?
Yeah, very good, thanks. And good to see you. Good to see the beard coming along well. Sorry that I extended the start of my summer break by not being in Budapest. What a cracking race that was. That was Sod's Law. So, curious to get back to it and see who's going to be hot after taking some time out.
Well, let's crack on with it then. Coming off the summer break, first of all, you guys are wise enough, let's say, to remember a time when there was no summer break. How was that? When you were still racing and you didn't have a break between March and October, November?
Well, I think the factories didn't technically, did they? But I still think that there was a little bit of an August break, certainly in my career, around that Budapest time. After that, they still had a little bit of a gap. But you're right, mate, not these sort of forced breaks for the whole team as it would be in terms of as it is now. So, but having said that, we're not doing 20 races either when we were competing on 23 or whatever they're trying to attempt this year. So, but we had testing. So, look, it swings in roundabouts, doesn't it? But I think that, look, it's a long season. Especially for the mechanics. We just think about the drivers selfishly, but for the whole team, hospitality, commercial side, marketing side, it's a big operation. So I think that the break would have been, well welcomed. And traveling under COVID is not exactly easy either. So everyone's had a pit stop. I feel the vibe in the industry, but they're looking forward to getting back racing again.
David,
I would concur with that. Yes, we didn't have as many races, but we had test teams. So my routine was finish a race on a Sunday, get home, leave Monday night for the test track, do 2-3 days. Then, because of the days of corporate sponsors, head off for a couple of days of trying to encourage someone to buy their products and then get home for the following weekend and focus on the next Grand Prix. So it was pretty intense. And, I certainly, there's lots of things I can't do at 50 years old. I absolutely couldn't do that intensity. So I think there's no harm in what Mark said about giving the team members a bit of a reprieve, but also I think commercially it makes sense. Most of Europe is on holiday, and therefore getting anything done and getting anyone to sit in front of a television and watch a Grand Prix is somewhat challenging. So commercially it makes sense to sort of push it either side of when people are back at home.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the teams, but let's specifically right now focus on the drivers. Which drivers do you think have used or maybe needed the time off to have a bit of a reset for the second half of the season?
Well, I think Valtteri Bottas springs to mind. He had a pretty rough run into the summer break, didn't he? So I think he'd be interested in having an opportunity to cool his heels. I know he's been riding gravel bikes, I think, in Colorado. So that's his way to de-stress, I suppose, and refocus and apply himself for the rest of the year and save his seat in many ways. So I think he'll be looking forward to it. I think that Max certainly would not want to break. He's had a rough run into it results-wise, and he would certainly want to be redeeming some of those rough results he had, whether it's a tyre failure in Baku, Silverstone controversy, and then obviously the 10-pin bowling that we saw at Turn 1 in Budapest. So he's had a real rough run in the last few events. So he won't be. I think Lewis will be looking forward to a bit of a break. So I think, look, mate, they're all pros. They know that, it's the same for everyone, a bit of a pit stop, but certainly the momentum and inertia, whether you've had a good lead in or a tough run in, the summer break can come at an interesting time for your motivations.
Yeah, well, I would pick up and say that the nature of the racers, as much as they'll be enjoying their break, if there was no such thing as a break, they would be enjoying getting on with Grand Prix racing, because that's what really floats the boat. So in terms of who needed a break, I'm not necessarily sure it's going to find anyone lap time. So I'm not sure if Valtteri is going to come back a faster man, but it will give him some time away from the mental anguish that he's been suffering this year and the questions over his future. And just on that, actually, I'm not sure if this is one of your questions coming up later, Alex, but I'm actually starting now to think that he may well get another year at Mercedes, for the simple reason that now that Lewis is signed for 2 years, if George was to go too early alongside Lewis, first year people will say, if he's slower, let's say, or if he doesn't get the results of Lewis, they'll say it's his first year and he's up against a 7 or 8 time world champion. If he does 2 years up against him and he's still a bit slower in the second year, the stock value that he's got right now, the momentum would run out of it. So I just wonder, I don't know, throw a question to you, Alex, whether you think I've lost it completely, or you think that could well be actually looking more like how they may play it out rather than moving George over there for next year.
I don't think we're going to have to wait long to find out. Of course, the argument for that, for what you suggested, is that it's been working. They're in the lead of both championships still, after a huge, and yes, all right, there's been some fortune in that, but they're still in the lead of both championships. If it's not broken, why would you get rid of him? But then if you don't sign him now, do you risk someone else poaching him? You lose that chance for a while. It's not as, what will probably happen, edit point here, what will probably happen is that it will get announced and whatever answer we have given will be wrong. But you can see a situation whereby, from your point of view, guys, when it hangs over you, the uncertainty, that can't be good for a driver, can it? We saw Sergio Perez last year. As soon as he found out he'd got the boot from what was then Racing Point, he seemed liberated. He's some of the best performances of his career. His breakthrough win. Is it just better to get that announcement out as soon as possible?
DC?
Well, what I would say is that racing drivers, in my experience, are eternal optimists. So there can be all sorts of, a storm going on around them, but there's nothing quite like strapping in a race car to focus your mind. Fear focuses the mind. So yes, it becomes a distraction if you're in a press conference always being asked the same question, because of course the question on our lips as to what the future holds for any given driver is the same for the French journalists, it's the same for the Germans and the Belgians and all the various other nationalities. So you get the same thing at you repeatedly, but then they do get paid rather well to have to deal with that flack before they can get in and have the fun of driving the car.
Okay, so on Instagram, all you're seeing is the drivers in the Mediterranean having the best time until the last couple of days, and then they started to get, as you said, David, a little bit itchy. George has been go-karting, Valtteri's been on his bike, as you said, Mark. I think everyone wants Belgium to come up pretty quickly, but we did get some news, disappointing news, you have to say, given how fantastic the circuit is, that Japan will not be on the calendar for this year. Perhaps not a surprise. But guys, how does this impact the championship? Because it takes away a extremely dependent circuit in terms of aerodynamics away from the drivers. Who do you think that favors in terms of the championship?
Well, first of all, I think, it's a phenomenal circuit. We know that. All the guys love racing there. The track, as you say, aerodynamically, mate, there's hardly any better venue in the world to drive a Formula One car at to, stretch its wings, particularly in that first sector. So cracking circuit. Shame we're not going there. It would have been under really challenging circumstances, even if we did go there, in terms of buses and hotel quarantine and all sorts of weird stuff, I think. So I think they made the right call. How does it affect not going to that venue? Red Bull, I imagine Max, that car would have been pretty awesome around there. They were strong in Silverstone, even though it's a long way away, but development, we think, is starting to ease off with this 21 package. But on the flip side, will we have some other events where there's 2 events, so maybe 2 Austins or, a couple of Bahrains or 2 Abu Dhabis, or we don't know how Liberty and F1 are going to how to try and condense the back end of this season, because we might have some repeat Grand Prix at the same venues. And that's, if you do have a competitive advantage, whether it is a Lewis, whether it is Max, you can double down on your points. So it's going to be fascinating, as Max did in Austria. It's going to be fascinating how the calendar shakes out in terms of venues off the back of the Japanese cancellation. And
we're in a situation, David, where we don't even know how many rounds of the World Championship we're going to get at the time of speaking.
Yeah, that is a slightly bizarre scenario, isn't it? Because you can't start doing the math on how many points are available. But I think everyone understands, even this far into the second season that's been affected by COVID, that there just is still some uncertainty. But one thing I think Formula One were really impressive in in last year was delivering a championship, and I've no doubt they'll be really impressive in doing the same. The fact that the announcement came from Japan only recently, Stefano Domenicali would have known that writing was on a wall, and he'll have his contingency plans in place. So we're curious to know where that's going to be. And as Mark says, it can then therefore benefit one team over the other if it's a particular track that suits them. But in the end, you have to deliver every weekend. And even if you've got a quick car, the racing gods, as we saw in Budapest, can come and play their part. What a bizarre race that was. You know, one car on the grid and all the various other things that went on. As I like that expression Mark had there, as the skittles into turn one.
Bowling, yeah.
Yeah, bowling, yeah.
Yeah, it was. And Alex, DC's a huge cricket fan too, and we don't know, you know, with the championship.
Yeah, we just can't shut him up about it, like all the time.
No, cricket, I know, yeah.
Pre-race, post-race.
You know, but the runs on the board is my point. You know, they always, in test match cricket, it's good to have the runs on the board. It's harder to chase them, and DC won't have a clue what I'm talking about. But when you've got the points on the board and you don't know how many races there are in the championship, it's obvious. But they are going for a bit of a, you know, what's the target in terms of how many points left on the table? I'd rather have them than not, for sure, under this current environment.
Interesting the sports you bring up, Mark. I think after the Euros, you brought up football. I think after the result this week, you brought up cricket. Terrific. Thank you.
Yeah. I just saw what happened. I think India had a reasonable result.
I didn't see every minute of all 5 days. Never mind.
I did. I watched it.
Yeah, no, I was. Unfortunately, I was glued to it, and then reminded of our. Well, never mind. Let's talk Formula One.
Yeah.
First half of the season, which driver surprised you the most in the first half?
Norris.
That's a good call.
He's outstanding. Yeah. Sorry, David, I spoke over you there. Say again.
Yeah, no, sorry. I just said that's a good call by Mark. I was going to say, you know, maybe Gasly had put in some pretty strong performances, but then we only got relative to his teammate, who is obviously a puppy peeing on the carpet still. So, Norris has been outstanding.
Yeah, he has been absolutely excellent, and McLaren signed him up nice and early, so I think they might have seen that one coming. Your moment of the season so far, gentlemen?
For me, it's got to be Silverstone. I think that first lap was absolutely extraordinary. It was brewing for a long time. They were both going to, at some point, make contact. It was in front of a full house of passionate British fans, 120,000 watching Lewis into Cops, and he thought, look, I've had enough. I want to give this move a go. And it didn't quite work out for him, but that's what top flight Formula One's about. Red Bull as a brand is about taking risks. They built the brand on risks. So Verstappen's toe-to-toe. Hamilton's got the trophies in the cabinet because of what he's done in the past. Brilliant moment. Okay, it was a big impact, yes, but they've got a lot more rounds in them left this year as well. So Silverstone for me.
I think it's been an incredible season of Grand Prix racing, and there's so many images that will stay in my mind. You know, if we go with Charles Leclerc, Monaco pole, and then not making the start, what a dream that would have been for a Monegasque driver in a Ferrari to have converted that to a win. You know, Lewis going to the grid in his own in Budapest, Silverstone, as Mark mentioned. There's been so many remarkable situations this year that whoever wins this title, we're going to be talking about this for decades to come.
Yeah, even the first race, mate, Bahrain. I mean, that was unbelievable performance from both of them. You know, that it was a slam dunk. You know, that Lewis was, Max was going to pass him and get the job done and disappear, but somehow Lewis found a way to win that Grand Prix. And it's been a brilliant season so far for sure.
Yeah, definitely set the standard for a dizzying season. So, bold predictions for the second half of the year. First thing that springs to mind, give us a bold prediction for the remaining races.
I think that Norris could win a Grand Prix.
Yeah.
I think that's possible. There's going to be another Baku or a Budapest. There'll be one or two more of those really wacky races. And some of the misfortune he's had, well, obviously the only misfortune he's had, which was in Budapest, which was no fault of his own, obviously. But I'd like to see him or Leclerc win. You know, again, I mean, I know Charles won with Ferrari already, but you know that would be against the grain, obviously. But Norris has got one more big, phenomenal result in this year, I think.
What do you think, David?
No, I definitely wouldn't try and predict against that because his performance has just been getting better and better. But I think that Max is going to come back hungry, focused, and that sort of tide will turn again in his favour. And then it'll be really interesting to see the battle between him and Hamilton. So, fairly obvious prediction, but I think the break for him is, in his first year of really going for a world championship, I think it's going to mean more to him than it will Lewis, who's done that a few times.
Cannot wait. Guys, I'm getting excited you talking about it. Both of those things happen. It's going to be absolutely phenomenal. Finally,
I think Max has worn out his mirror. Shadow boxing, he's so ready to go. He's with DCL Max. My God, is he ready? Pumped up, and Red Bull better be ready. So, can't wait, mate, for Spa.
Finally, heading to Spa, one of the world's great racetracks. What's the first Formula One memory that springs to mind if I bring up Spa?
Taking a Minardi into Eau Rouge with no power steering. You're not going to forget that in a hurry, son. I tell you, it's not nice with no downforce. Well, sorry, on high downforce, but that thing had no downforce. So I wasn't alone in my underpants then, I can tell you.
Well, that rather conveniently brings me to my underpants when I broke the bone in my leg in 1990, and they cut the race suit off me in the medical centre in front of my mother and Jackie Stewart, and there was holes in my underpants. So there's the first memory for me at Spa.
Pants-based circuit, fantastic. So many amazing memories, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time. Whether you be by the side of a motorway, whether you be in slightly more glamorous surroundings, great to get your thoughts. Can't wait. And if you can, join us for the action from Spa-Francorchamps. A high-tech reminder of a post-it note: 6 p.m. for qualifying, 6:30 for the race on Channel 4.